Chaos2Cured podcast is here to explain our perspective of the human experience. We hope it leads to questions, learning, wisdom, and knowledge. Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. We are going to do a show and jump right into something that I feel really strongly about, and it's kind of a loaded subject. And this is from a little different angle, but guilt. And to all the people that are listening, one of the things that's really tricky, and again, for me, is when someone is diagnosed with something, there's guilt that is just passed around the family, honestly, like, chocolates. It's, the parents feel guilty, the individual feels guilty, and just the overall sense of guilt and shame. Of course, we've talked about shame before, and they're somewhat related. But for me, even to this day, I look back on things that, whether I did them to a friend or a coworker or family member, there's a lot of guilt that goes with having something. And a lot of times I do feel like a burden on the people that love me. And that's not something anyone should ever feel. So I think, the only way I can ever get some of this stuff out is by actually talking about it. So I thought I would kind of bring up that particular issue. And Jeffrey, you want to jump in and go for it. Let's talk about it.
Well, when I think about guilt, what pops into my head is, well, of all the people that I've worked with, we're up at 2,000 or something different individuals. I've seen a lot of guilt. And I think the thing that pops into my head about it is that the parents feel guilty. I have had so many literally hundreds of parents say, "Oh my God, I was mean to my child. I just thought they were being willful or lazy. And I got on them pretty hard. And I just feel so guilty about that because they're having trouble later in life. And I could have forestalled that by simply figuring out what was wrong. But I did try to go to experts, and experts never helped. But I still should have figured something out on Charlie's mother or father or whatever the case may be. So guilt's being thrown around. It's just natural. And the root cause, if you think of it, is it's pathetic how poorly people are, the diagnosticians are doing a really crappy job. They don't know what they're dealing with. They think they do, but they don't. And if you ever find a clinician who does know, like, for example, most of my clients are on the spectrum, you find somebody who is really, really adept at working with that population, I pretty much guarantee you they'll have a 2-year waiting list. If they're bad, they won't have a waiting list at all, but they won't help. They'll probably hurt. So there's just not enough known about what to do about people who are non-neurotypical and having trouble socially and with school. And then the parents go through hell, and then they figure out later that they just feel guilty. They should have figured out. They should have spoken to someone to help. They should have sought forth to find someone anywhere to help. But it's not their fault. It's a lack of knowledge, and we have an increasing base of people who need help, need to be taught differently. They don't process the way that neurotypical people do. They do poorly at school. They do poorly socially. It's just a mess. And as the population increases, and we have wonderful technology and social media, which are promoting problems with school and with socialization, we have a tremendous amount of people who need help, and we don't have them. So when you start talking about guilt, that's the first thing that pops into my mind, Kirk.
Well, when you mentioned the parents, I have two that are in my mind, very specifically. And because of my at least direction of research on the endocrine system, there was one parent that I remember, and they called up and were very upset because they felt like their age when they had a child might have affected their hormones, and therefore it was their fault that their child had bipolar or autism or whatever the case might be. But I remember really clearly just how upset they were. And I knew what a lot of the questions that were being asked were specifically kind of searching for accountability. And so, and I'll never forget, my answer was just straight up, it's not your fault. This is, we have environmental factors, we have genetic factors, we have, I think the amount of guilt people feel, especially parents, when you see a child suffering, or siblings, that's a big one too. A sibling sees, they're doing fine. Their sibling struggles with friendships, is impulsive, acts out in ways that are socially awkward. And if they're really close to the same age and they're in the same school, they kind of can see the difference. And then you also then get into kind of some other potential issues, which, I think as parents, they should always be aware of, codependency. You want to make sure that your child knows it's not their responsibility to make the other sibling feel, good. There's only so much we can do. And so that's, it does circle around the family. And I think the only thing, and I absolutely agreed with what you said, the only thing we can really do to make people feel less guilty is earlier education. So a lack of awareness. And the reason why I say that is because the only thing that I've been able to notice in terms of massive difference people can make is when they get help early. So the earlier they get help, the sooner they stop, I think, sometimes building up walls of denial. And then they find the right person and then implement. That's the key part. A lot of people will go seek out an expert. They will go seek out books. They will research it, and then they stop. That's that last step of taking action on the things that you need to. It's a form of empowerment, and it makes, and for me, one thing that, I always suggest for people to do is include the individual in the decision-making process, kind of empower the whole family. So it's not just, this psychiatrist told me to do this, so I have to, or my mom and dad make me do this. You want to be able to have them say, look, I notice a difference. This is helping. This is not. Establishing lines of communication isn't just helpful for the emotions involved, but also for the family and for wisdom and knowledge. You need that communication. And then, like you had mentioned earlier, a lot of the individuals you and I both work with, especially when they are either on the spectrum or dealing with a more intense case of something like, ADHD, bipolar, or something like that, they do struggle to communicate. So if the family takes early steps and they start, respectfully communicating back and forth, always with honesty and calmness. And we did a show earlier about being calm. I would highly suggest that. There were some great suggestions Jeffrey made in that one. But those things help teach them how to communicate when they leave and enter the workforce in the world. So, besides, and you had mentioned earlier that it's very hard to find an expert, and a lot of the people that have expertise from a classic tradition, so in other words, like, a PhD, an MD, lots of education in that system. The only problem is that a lot of the classes and the things they are taught are based, well, I won't even get into that. What I would say is that finding somebody that really knows, like you said, is very difficult. So what are some things that you can kind of tell parents? One, we can kind of get into some things to look for. I think that's always helpful. And whenever we do this, we want people to remember this show is never meant to diagnose or help you diagnose. We are talking specifically about what we have seen and dealt with and experienced, just to help you maybe get an insight in, and maybe write some notes down and then go seek medical help. Make sure you always seek a qualified medical professional, because there may be medication involved, right? Exactly. So what are some things for people listening that are waiting to get in? Some things that maybe they can do. Let's start with maybe like 3 to 5 things that you suggest, and I'll bounce off of that.
Yeah, I don't know if I have 3 to 5, but I can certainly comment on it. Most important thing to do is and I do this with every new client, and I've done it with a lot of old ones too. Tell the parent that they are the expert on their child, and not to be talked out of some of the instinctive things, the instinctive helping things that they do by any professional. Because most, and you alluded to this, most of the help available is non-creative stuff that was used for people with ADD 15, 20 years ago. People don't really understand what autism is and why it's proliferating. So you let them know that trust your instincts, talk to your friends, and what you want to know is, you want to know from the experts that you talk to, is you want to know what's really going on, and you have to be involved. You have to be. If you're a parent of a kid with issues, learning or social, you can't just farm it out. If you do, you won't succeed. You're with your kid more than anybody else. So you really have to do a lot of the work. And some of the other podcasts we've done have talked about things that you can do. It's like, talk stuff out, make it known to your kid that you're trying to seek out help. Don't blame them, or don't shame them, because that's the biggest. I mean, if I were to really think about what the biggest or the most awful thing you can do to a person who's highly sensitive anyway, is to shame them. And a lot of what parents do that, they think the child is just being a pain. Life's hard enough. They're thinking, and I have to deal with this. Don't shame. Absolutely look at it from the perspective of, it's not really my child's problem. They're wired that way. And what I want from the professional is, I want them to figure out how the kid thinks, which is usually visual, and work with people who will do things, like it could be a physical therapist. It could be a lot of people who do things that reward the child for the right behavior, teach them to use their innate abilities, which again is almost always visual, and use the weaknesses to overcome the strengths. Praise and reward your child's effort. If you see your kid trying to do something, work, schoolwork, whatever, make it worth their while to do it again. Because at the bottom line, anybody would be shamed by the way they're pretty typically being treated by both parents and people at school. But you've got a highly sensitive population, HSP. And those people, when they're shamed, it lasts forever. And you want to cut that out as early as you can. And any intervention that you do, explain it to the kid that you're doing it to help them cope better with school and with friends, and that everybody really needs to learn how to do that. They have specialists that can help you do that. Take the shame out of it. If you work with your child, and again, you're going to need to make real certain, and this is a tough one, that you don't show disappointment if your child isn't mastering something. Because as a teacher, your job is to impart information. And the way I look at it, if the lesson isn't getting through, it says a lot more about you and the way you're teaching than your kid and the way they learn. But there's some universalities, if that's a word, about people who are non-neurotypical and how they learn. They're visual. They need to know why they're learning something, and they kind of need immediate reward and a lot of praise. Not too much, because that puts pressure on them, or so they think. But praise, good, honest praise, when you really see it. That stuff will really help. And, in terms of seeing somebody, it's going to be hard. We're not producing people, professionals to work with this population at anywhere near the rate we need to. So you're going to end up doing a lot of it yourself. So the biggest single thing, and I'll finish, don't shame, and you'll be so much better off.
Oh, I love that, and 100% agree. There were a couple things that you brought up, and I kind of wanted to reiterate. So, one, on the never give up. On a different podcast, you had mentioned, for parents to focus on the effort and not the result. And that's such an important thing. And you mentioned that in a couple different ways, but I did want to mention, like you said, like when you tell somebody, oh, you're the best at this, you are wonderful, a lot of times that does put pressure. And I don't think parents are always fully aware of just how hard, and we've talked about this before, how hard those children are trying. So if you have someone that's on the spectrum, someone with ADHD, somebody that has an actual diagnosis of, bipolar 1, OCD, I could just go down the list. All of those individuals, and I speak from personal experience, getting those diagnoses, when you hear them, it's kind of like a daydream. It's weird, because someone's, again, I don't love the labels. I know they're needed for the medical field and coding, but when somebody tells you that, it doesn't really hit home. What happens is, over time, definitely what shaped my belief or my knowledge, which was improper, what I guess shaped my ignorance and stigma of some of these things, was not medical. It wasn't from a medical book. It was from everything you hear on social media. People, I think somebody posted a meme about one character being happy in one scene and sad in the other, and they joked about it being bipolar. You see it with like OCD. Somebody will say, oh, my OCD is all messed up because my office is a mess. So what happens is society, our TV shows, our social media shapes what everybody thinks they're actually dealing with. So, one thing I did want to say is, and to kind of feed off what you were speaking about, the reason that we're having a hard time getting people that are trained to help these individuals is because getting through medical school, getting through 4 years of college and tedious work is honestly near impossible. It was near impossible for me, not because the classes were difficult. And here's the thing, they just weren't interesting. And when you force people down a certain path, especially non-neurotypical thinkers, they don't want to follow the traditional path. They want to know why they have to do something. And honestly, there isn't a good reason for a lot of the classes people have to take. There just isn't. So what happens is we lose these phenomenal minds. And like, if anyone's familiar with The Good Doctor, that movie shows what somebody with, it's not, a perfect example, but I thought they really tried hard in that show. But it does show what someone is capable of doing. When you have eidetic memory, or the ability to recognize perfect pitch, you instantly recognize patterns. Those are useful skills, and they are being lost because we have requirements that force them down a path that does not work. So homeschooling is definitely a great way to go if you have the ability. Not everyone does.
Yeah.
So
most don't, Kirk.
Most don't. And that's something that is, I think you can kind of backstop some of it by what you had said as well, which was, don't shame them. Don't don't be upset when they were failing. I think that was your, I don't think that's verbatim, but if they are not succeeding in something and you just really get on them, they, at least for me, what happened was I went through two things. Yeah. Two things went through my head. So one was literally a ratio. It's how investors think about an investment. What's my return on an investment? Right. If I keep doing this, does that help? If it does not, then, I lost my train of thought. But again, no, I didn't. So the return on investment, in other words, I would go, if I keep doing this, what am I getting out of it? If everybody's yelling at me, if everybody's telling me these things, so then why do it? And then what happens is then they yell at you for different things, for quitting. So, I would say when you're looking for experts and you're waiting and you're on a waiting list, it can be excruciating. One of the things you can do is look for groups in the area that work with that, because a lot of the experts you're going to find have been through things before. They have been through, a particular circumstance that you will feel very familiar with. And they are, again, not a lot of the medical experts have been in the situation. If you can ask your doctor if they have a child that is on the spectrum and that's what you're looking for, that's very helpful, right?
It doesn't have to be, because they could be doing the wrong stuff with a kid. But if they have a kid with issues, all parents, and I'm just, the parenting is such an instinctual thing. They want to help, and most of them believe that the process of educating professionals who will help them with the diagnosis and the things that will help, those people are the way they're going to go, because they think there's so many people out there who are trying crank things, don't know what they're talking about. They haven't had medical training. That's all valid. But a lot of times those that have had the medical training are the worst. And what you were alluding to was the process of becoming a doctor, or, you don't have to be a psychiatrist, a psychologist. The very process weeds out the people that would be best at that job. It's tedious, it's make work, and the non-neurotypical person recognizes that, and they all just about universally think, I don't want it that bad. This is torture. So what you get by default is a bunch of bookkeepers and bean counters, and they don't get it. One last comment from me on this subject is I was thinking about people with dyslexia, who almost always are the hardest working people I know. There are a lot of people with dyslexia. And what happens is if you tell someone to sound out words and the words in print look differently to them and they don't attack things phonetically, what happens is they're trying so hard is they get so frustrated, and what they think logically is, I'm dumb. They all think they're dumb. A lot of them have unbelievable work ethics, but dyslexia is so easy to explain if you know what it is, and so easy to work with. It's just, you don't teach a dyslexic child to read at age 5. They're going to read later. They're going to blossom later. But so much damage is done, and so much guilt is done, because the kid, by the time they reach 8 and they're ready to read, they're convinced that they're dumb. It's a killer. It's just the worst thing you can take from someone is their feeling of worth, and that's the norm.
And it is something that took me, for anyone listening to this show, it took me like 40 years to realize my own worth. That's too long for people to wait. So you do need to build people up. It's very important. And it's, I did want to say, all the, MDs out there and stuff like that, this is not a slam on your ability to succeed or anything. This is just literally, we are in need of people that are thinking in a very different way so that they can help a growing population that thinks the same. And the system, I don't have any quick answers for it. But I do think that continue to look for the expert that really gets you. Don't ever give up on finding that. You need to find something that you really enjoy, because if you're, and also again, that your child enjoys too. If it's a disaster every single time, it becomes a traumatic experience. So I definitely want to get into, and I'll give kind of some people a heads up. I would like to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of being non-neurotypical that we're just starting to see with the rise of Chat GPT and AI, as all of a sudden computers start doing things that honestly humans used to be the only ones that can do it. There's a benefit to being that visual spatial thinker. So we can kind of jump into that, but for everybody that's listening, I really hope you listen to some of those things about not shaming. That was really important. Make sure that you don't punish them for, failing. Reward and praise when they're working hard.
Yeah.
That is so. And one other thing that I remember Jeffrey said in the previous podcast, which was, don't ever let them give up. If they keep trying, if they keep going, if they believe in themselves, they will succeed. So phenomenal show. Again, we will follow up. Please, subscribe, like, share it, and reach out with questions, and we'll kind of continue to build on what we're doing. So Jeffrey, thank you again for the time and the phenomenal suggestions. It was dealing with guilt was something that has been very difficult for me. And I guess I just want to end by saying, anyone listening, whether you're the parent, whether you're the individual, the sibling, don't attach your diagnosis to yourself or the individual. The person is separate from their diagnosis. And when they are winning and they are succeeding and they are stable, and then that thing never defines them. So again, just make sure, detach the diagnosis from the individual. Don't shame them, and build them up. We all need that. All humans do. It doesn't matter who you are. So we'll end there. Have a beautiful day, everyone, and we look forward to speaking soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know, and definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.